I thought I'd make a video for you and give a kind of another dimension to the material, and you can hear my voice discussing the Bible. And I want to talk about Genesis, particularly the theme of families in Genesis. Genesis is organized by families. Even before human beings come into the picture, there's the formula in Genesis 2. Now, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth. And the creation account is given even before Adam and Eve come into the picture. And then we have Adam and Eve and their descendants, Cain and Abel. You all know about Seth, who's the son who survives, the good son, and his descendants going on to Noah. Of course, with Noah, the world is destroyed, and God starts anew with Noah's family, Noah and his unnamed wife, as we've discussed, and Noah becomes a second Adam. And then you have all sorts of people and a whole world populated. And Genesis 10 gives every nation in the world, at least as the world was known by the ancient Hebrews. And there's this proliferation, what Samuel Taylor Coleridge called desynonymization. Everything becomes different. Fewer and fewer things are the same. And there's this diversity. And then, in the midst of all of this, and you see the Tower of Babel story, and people no longer speak one language, and that's even more diversity. And then God plucks this one guy named Abraham and takes him and separates him from everybody else in the world. So it's not like Noah where everybody else dies. With Abraham, everybody else remains, but Abraham is separated off from them. And God calls Abraham from his home and takes him to a new land, separates him even from his nephew Lot, from his brother Nahor, who remains behind in Syria. Abraham is a new start and is given this promise of the land of Canaan, which of course he does not yet occupy. Even though he's there, he doesn't own it yet, as he acknowledges. And there's only one problem. This is all about generations. Abraham has no son, and he and his wife are getting older. So his wife suggests, as a last resort, that Abraham beget, as the Bible would say, the King James Version language, he would beget a son on Hagar, their Egyptian handmaid. And this is not a liaison. They were not having an affair. This is just kind of business. Hagar gives birth to Ishmael. And of course, once it happens, Sarah is very jealous and wants Ishmael out. And so Hagar and Ishmael have to depart to the wilderness, where Ishmael becomes the ancestor, it is said, of the Arabs, which is another story. But Abraham's kind of back to square one. Where are the generations that he's been promised? And he's been given circumcision as a sign of his separation. But, once Ishmael is gone, he has no son to be circumcised. And then this miracle occurs, the miracle baby of Isaac, Yitzhak, which means laughter in Hebrew, because the birth of a baby to this incredibly old woman and this incredibly old man is just so outlandish. It's such a laughing matter. But it happens, and it's a miracle, and Isaac is there, and the future is assured. But, as we've seen, God in Genesis 22 makes this incredible demand that Abraham sacrifice Isaac, the miracle baby. And we've discussed, does Abraham know all the time that God is going to relent, or does he really think God is asking this of him? Or does he just trust in God to know whatever is right? In any respect, Isaac is spared. When I taught this in Sunday school, of course, the kids were very upset. This is it's not an appropriate story to teach to 8-year-olds. I did it because it was in the curriculum. It was in the material. But we kind of got through the material, and then I said, oh, good, God provided a lamb to be slaughtered instead of the little boy. And they were very upset. They didn't want the cute little lamb to be sacrificed. You kind of wish God had substituted an amoeba, some sort of unicellular organism, instead of the lamb, so the kids wouldn't have been upset. But in any event, Isaac is spared. And as we saw, the next sentence after Isaac is spared, we're told about all of Nahor's children, all that proliferation. And so the themes of families, of generations continue. And Isaac marries one of those children, Rebekah, Nahor's daughter. And Isaac he never leaves. He's the one patriarch to never leave the promised land. The servant Eliezer is sent to bring Rebekah, but Isaac and Rebekah have a very happy marriage, the kind of happiest, I think, of all the patriarchs. But then the second half of Genesis, more generations, Jacob and Esau, are these brothers who are incredible rivals. And Esau is this macho man, red-faced and strong and full of feats of daring. And Jacob is this little nerdy, geeky, weenie guy who operates by his wits and his cunning. And Isaac loves the He-Man Esau button. The mom, Rebecca, loves the nerdy, cunning, smart Jacob. And Jacob gets one of the blessings, gets the birthright out of Esau when Esau is starving, and sells it for a mess of a can of beans, as it were. And then he gets the blessing out of his father Isaac, who's blind, by pretending to be Esau and putting on bear skins, so he will think he's the kind of hairy Esau. And so Jacob gets this blessing by trickery. Esau's very angry, perhaps righteously. Jacob has to flee. He goes to Nahor's grandson, his mother's nephew, Laban, back in kind of eastern Syria, I guess, and marries, well, he first wants Rachel, but Laban tricks him and gives him Leah, her elder sister, instead. He marries both those women, and then he has two concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah. And he has 12 sons with those ladies and one daughter, Dinah. So he virtually has this whole mini nation. It's a very large family now. And eventually he decides he has to go home. He's outstayed his welcome at his uncle's. And he has this ambiguous encounter with the angel before meeting his brother, which we talked about. And then he meets his brother, and you might expect battle, conflict. Esau might be aggrieved, but Esau says, oh, there's enough for everybody. Let bygones be bygones, at least for the moment. And it's a very moving scene. And Jacob settles down in the land that had been promised to his grandfather. And then, more trouble. There's the incident with Dinah at Shechem, and there's the Joseph issue, because Rachel is his favorite wife, Jacob's favorite wife. Rachel dies prematurely. He makes a fuss over Joseph, gives him the coat of many colors, the ketonet pasim in Hebrew, this wonderful coat. And the Leah children, the elder children, feel betrayed. Reuben, the eldest of the Leah children, has already gotten himself in trouble because he had an inappropriate affair with one of his father's concubines, and so he's kind of disqualified himself from the primogeniture, from being the firstborn son. And we're seeing, the firstborn son never gets it. It's always kind of one of the younger sons who gets it. And we see this pattern throughout Genesis. And the brothers are very resentful of Joseph, and they sell Joseph into slavery. And Jacob is devastated. We think Joseph has disappeared, or they think Joseph has disappeared. We know that he's actually in Egypt, prospering, doing well. He gets thrown into jail and then is delivered and becomes Pharaoh's advisor and leads Egypt through an economic crisis, the famine that's afflicting the entire region. It's kind of like the recent recession. There were leaders who said, well, our economy suffered, but we at least avoided the worst because of our skillful economic management. And Joseph's management of Egypt was somewhat like that. On the other hand, back in Canaan, where Jacob still was, they were starving. And Jacob sends some of the sons down to Egypt to get food. And after this long series of devices and stratagems, Joseph reveals himself, and they're reconciled, and the entire family comes down to Egypt. And there's reconciliation. And they go down in yet further generations. And Genesis ends with Jacob dying and giving the blessing to all his sons and to Joseph's sons, his grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh. But he switches his hands. So, again, the younger gets the blessing, which should go to the older, which is this tradition of younger sons from Isaac is younger than Ishmael, Jacob is younger than Esau, Joseph is younger than Reuben and the other brothers, and finally Ephraim is younger than Manasseh. So you have this continuing cycle of generations, but at the end, the family is so big because there are 12 children, and who knows how many grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they have really ceased to become a family and have been transformed into a nation. They're an entire people. And this is going to create problems in the future, and this is what sets up Exodus, is that once the Israelites become a kind of nation within the nation of Egypt, the Egyptians are very fearful and begin to persecute them. And that's what sets up Moses and sets up this new cycle where God intervenes once again. But from this point forward, it's not going to be about the family anymore as it was in Genesis. It's going to be about the nation.